From WFIU in Bloomington, Indiana, this is Earth Eats, and I'm your host, Kate Young. Have you ever had a hunch about something, tested it, and then been shocked by the results? That's what happened to pharmaceutical microbiologist and public health scholar Funmi Ayeni. She took a traditional Nigerian home remedy and applied the rigors of scientific research to test its efficacy. The results were nothing short of jaw-dropping. Stay tuned for the whole story, coming right up on Earth Eats. Support for Earth Eats comes from Malheur-Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Malheur-Grodner Attorneys, understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. On the web at lawmg.com. Thanks for listening to Earth Eats. I'm Kate Young. My guest today is Funmi Ayeni.
My full name is Funmi Ayeni, but I always go by Funmi.
Funmi Ayeni is assistant professor in the Department of Environmental and Occupational Health in the Indiana University School of Public Health.
Currently, I work on antibiotics resistance, microorganisms that are resistant to the current treatment of antibiotics, especially bacterial infection. So I try to look at the prevalence of those microorganisms in the environment everywhere. So that's the first thing I do. Then the second thing I do is human gut microbiome. The community of microorganisms that are residing in the gut, in the mouth, on the skin. I look at them generally, and then I relate this to therapeutic food. So I look at food that are just beyond nutrition that could be used as medicine. So those are the three things that I do.
Looking at the environment, and then also looking at the human body. And you said the skin, the mouth, the gut. So where these microorganisms reside and maybe the effects that they have on human health?
Yes. So human being, we are composed of almost the same number, like 50-50 human cell, microbial cell.
Oh.
So like some authors actually claim that we are more microbes than human. So we have so much microorganism within us, and any little change in those microorganisms, anything that affects the microorganism affects human. And like, think about anything. Depression, anxiety, traveling, changing of diet, any form of sickness, as it's affecting the human, it's also affecting the microbes that are present in the body. So I tend to look at this relationship between the microbes and the human. Some work that I've done previously, I look at the effect of lifestyle, like different lifestyle, urban lifestyle, rural lifestyle, the food we eat, how it affects the microorganisms that are present within us, international traveling. That is one of my favorites because I'm an immigrant. So I came here from Nigeria. And when I came here, I just discovered I started having so many new allergies that I've never had before. And it's just because the microorganism in me, they change. And then I started seeing those symptoms. So I tend to look at effect of those things on the human microbes generally. And then the food we eat beyond the nutrition.
Yeah, so I was thinking, in that example you just gave of moving here from Nigeria, so it's the environment that you're in is different, and also the food you're eating is different.
Yes.
And then maybe the stress of being in a new environment where it's less familiar.
Yeah. Actually, I think I would say is the environment. For the food, my food didn't drastically change. I'm still eating more or less what I eat in Nigeria. Of course, maybe the preparation is different. The water that is used for the preparation is different, of course. My food is more or less constant, but the environment is totally different. And the environment comes with its own microorganism, which is different from the microorganism in Nigeria.
I'd like to hear a little bit about your background and how some of your early influences and kind of what led you into doing this kind of work.
Okay, so my background has a big influence on what I do. And that is what I always say, like, my research is basically influenced by where I come from. So let's take it one by one. The first thing I say I do is antibiotics resistance. I come from an environment where there is a gross misuse of antibiotics. In the Western world, if you want to take an antibiotics, you get a prescription from a doctor. Where I come from, people have headache, and then we prescribe for ourselves that, oh, I have headache. Then I will tell myself that, let me go and take tetracycline. And then you just walk to the pharmacy store, and then you buy tetracycline. So there's just this extreme misuse of antibiotics. And it's not that there is no regulation. There are laws. The law of the country is just like United States, that it is only the doctor that should prescribe. But nobody follows the law, and there's no enforcement. So the law is there, but there's no enforcement. And so the antibiotics are everywhere. And then what is the result? The result is extreme antibiotics resistant bacteria in the environment.
Funmi says that the problem of antibiotic-resistant bacteria is even more worrisome because in Nigeria, infectious disease is still the leading cause of death.
That is in contrast to the Western world. Here, maybe it's non-infectious diseases are the major cause of death, maybe cardiovascular disease, cancer, stroke. Those are the major cause of death here, the leading. But not in my country. In my country, it's still infectious disease, something caused by bacteria, by virus. That is what is still killing most people. Okay, so now we have an environment that the major cause of death is infectious disease that you have to treat with antibiotics. And then that's the first problem. Then the second problem is the antibiotics are really not effective again because of the overwhelming number of antibiotics-resistant bacteria. So you are sick, and then the antibiotic that you're supposed to take is ciprofloxacin. But most of these bacteria that is causing the illness is already resistant to ciprofloxacin. And that is why we have a high number of infectious disease deaths, because people are sick and the antibiotics are not even working for them because of the resistance that we have. So when I finished my first degree is in microbiology, my second is in pharmaceutical microbiology. I did my master's in a school of pharmacy. And then my third degree, PhD, is also pharmaceutical microbiology. And I become interested, like looking at the situation, my background, and the way we abuse antibiotics and everything. So I just, okay, let me try to see, like, to have a real sense, the surveillance of antibiotics-resistant bacteria in the environment. So I look at food, I look at poultry, like the poultry environment, I look at the farm, I look at human. So I just I isolate bacteria from different environments, and I try to see how resistant they are to antibiotics, and it's overwhelming. Like that overwhelming resistant. So that is the first thing I do. So now when I've proved that, established the fact that these bacteria in our environment are very resistant, then my second research question will always be, if antibiotics is no longer working in this environment, what else can we use beside antibiotics for treatment of infectious disease that is so much in Nigeria, Africa, where I come from? So then my second approach will be, I will get the antibiotics resistance shrink. I will establish that antibiotics is not effective. Then I will look for what could be effective. And that is what led me to therapeutic food and probiotics.
Therapeutic foods and probiotics.
Yes.
So the medicine that is available isn't working. And so what else is possible?
Yeah.
So what does your research look like? Like, how do you do this kind of research? Are you out in the field? Are you working with populations? Are you working in a lab? Are you analyzing data? Are you doing all of those things?
Yeah, so I work with environmental human data. So I collect maybe bacteria from different places, from the environment, from the human. Then I bring them to the lab, test the antibiotics resistance, if they are resistant. And then I now look for different food, like cultural food, traditional food, that has maybe like some properties, bioactive compounds in them that makes, like maybe that is able to kill or stop the growth of those bacteria. So then we put all this together, and of course we analyze the data. So I'm on the field, I'm in the lab. So I do all those things. Yes, I do all of them together.
And so what kind of traditional foods are you talking about that you might study? Like, would you look at fermented foods in people's culture, that
Yeah.
kind of thing?
Yeah. So when I work on therapeutic food, my approach is like an anthropologist. So like I said, I kept on looking for solution to antibiotics resistant infection, and I turned to food. People do this all over the world. People use different things. Some people work on nuts. Some people work on vegetable. There's a lot of data on vegetable fruit. I think everybody knows now that fruit and vegetable is very good for us. But for me, I look at the traditional food, fermented food made from cereal. Why? Western medicine have done a lot of good, like a lot, like it's so great. People now can live with different chronic disease. There's medicine, there's this thing. And then you will actually expect that maybe there will be no more sickness in the world, right? Because of all the advances, like just look at the great, it's just like less than 200 years ago that people will, if you are sick, the doctor will be bleeding. Like they will cut the person and they will be removing the blood so that the disease in you can go. And then they kill the person from bleeding. But we've come a long way. However, there's still a lot of chronic disease all around us. People in Western world, people can manage the chronic disease. They may not like die very fast, but people live with a lot of chronic diseases. And then, and how began to look like, before Western medicine, what do people do? That's the anthropology part of my work. Like, in different culture, what do people do? And then does it work?
Funmi wanted to know if there are traditional therapeutic food practices that are actually effective. She wanted to find out if it was just the placebo effect. Do these practices work just because people believe that they will? Or could she find scientific evidence that some of these cultural food as medicine traditions are helpful in preventing and treating disease? She decided to start her research in her own culture. After a short break, Funmi will tell us the story of how she may have stumbled upon a nearly miraculous treatment for a widespread disease in her home country of Nigeria. Support for Earth Eats comes from Columbus, Indiana, overflowing with everywhere art and unexpected architecture. Tickets for guided architecture tours and trip planning at columbus.in.us. This is Earth Eats. I'm your host, Kate Young, and we're back with Funmi Ayeni, professor in environmental and occupational health at the School of Public Health at Indiana University. She studies antibiotic resistance, environmental health, and probiotics. In her home country of Nigeria, antibiotics are overused and have become ineffective. In the face of this reality, Funmi wanted to know if there were any traditional therapeutic food practices that could be scientifically proven to be effective against disease, beyond a placebo effect. She decided to start in her own culture.
Malaria is endemic in Nigeria. Like, it's a normal thing. Everybody, we are used to malaria. It's an endemic thing. So we live with malaria we is that should I say it's our friend? We get sick, we recover, we get sick again, we recover. So because it's endemic. However, in my culture, I noticed that there is a particular food made from corn. It's not sweet corn, feed corn, something like feed corn. So they will just soak that feed corn for 48 hours. Then they blend it, and then they will allow the water to settle. There's going to be a liquid on top and then a solid part. And then I noticed that people always drink that liquid just from corn. They don't add anything to it. So they'll be drinking it. So if you have malaria, people drink that thing. And then if they want to make malaria drug, they use that water from the corn. Like they just boil some leaves in it. And that is what people use traditionally to treat malaria.
So Funmi's in Nigeria. She's noticing that people are treating malaria by drinking the liquid from dry corn that's been soaked for 2 days and blended. She has a graduate student working with her, and they decide to do some studies on this liquid to find out what's going on.
Let's go beyond the cultural belief. Let's see if it works. So we did a kind of animal study. We were feeding the rats with that food, that water on top of the corn. And then when we put malaria parasite into the rat, malaria parasite could not survive. Not a single one.
Wow.
Not a single malaria parasite. Because we compare that with the control. Of course, with the control, there's a lot of malaria parasite. But with the rat that we were feeding that corn, the water on top of corn, nothing. It was absolute zero parasitemia. And my student and I will say, what? What is this? like, it was so unbelievable. And then we now say, no wonder. So people, in my culture, maybe some people will never have malaria just because they were drinking that water. And maybe like they just prepare that and they just take it like a beverage and they won't have malaria. Whereas maybe their neighbor is always having malaria and the food that they eat is the different. So I think that started my journey into anthropology and therapeutic food. Like these people believe this thing. It's working for them, and we actually published that work. We published it in Malaria Journal in 2020. So it's a published work. Like, okay. So with that, I now continue my investigation for that food, not only with malaria, that corn water, we now start using it against different things. And up to today, I'm still it's still astonishing to me because no matter what I use this water against, it kills them. It kills viruses. It kills bacteria that is causing diarrhea. And also in my culture, they use that water. Like when a child has diarrhea, they give the water to the child. So I decided to use it against the bacteria that is causing diarrhea. It killed most of them. We use them against viruses. It's killed them. Most things I use them against, they are killing them. So I have so much preliminary study and preliminary data on this particular food. And it's not just an African food. It's just something that anyone can prepare. It's just corn is the third most abundant cereal in the world after wheat and rice. So it's all over the world, and it's just to soak and this thing, and then we get all this benefit that is being used in my country. So I'm continuing with that. I'm still continuing working on that corn food. I think very soon I will actually go for a clinical trial with this same thing, and then after that, I will also work on other series. So my focus on therapeutic food, I think I'm focusing more now on fermented cereal that could be fermented. So that's my focus. So because I know we have a lot of data on fruits, vegetable, and all that. Everybody knows that now. But what about this one that people don't really take note of and is having all these benefits?
Well, that is an extraordinary story about that. I could see why that would have excited you and said, okay, this is where I'm going. Because that's amazing. Do you think that it has to do with the time period, like the fact that it's fermenting for 48 hours? I mean, 48 hours isn't a long time in a fermentation scale, but like it's not just they rinse the water in corn. Mm-hmm. It's sat there for 48 hours. Mm-hmm. So do you think it's something about what the microorganisms are that it's pulling from the environment in that time, or that's already on the corn and is having a chance to develop, or like what do you think What are your theories about what's in that water?
Yeah, so my hypothesis now, which I'm working on the hypothesis, like there's a current, another animal study we are starting maybe next month. And my hypothesis is this. I think it's the corn itself, not the microorganism. So is the corn itself, it has some bioactive compounds like phenolics compound, polyphenols. So these are very active compound that is present in the cereal. So, but these compounds, sometimes they're in a banded form, like they are banned. So then when we soak that corn for 48 hours, it relaxes those compounds.
Oh, so it releases it.
It's released. So they relax and then it releases them. So that is the first step. Then when we consume them as human, then the microorganism that is present in our gut, they now interact with that corn and break down those compounds more. So it started outside the body with that soaking, and then it continues inside the body with the gut microbiome. That is where I combine the therapeutic food and microbiome. So the microorganisms present in my gut, they now work on those food. They break it down further, and then they release maybe a lot of polyphenols and all those things. And these compounds has systemic effects. So they don't only stay in the gut. So when they are released, they travel to they go into the blood. They could penetrate. They go into different parts of the body and they exert a health benefit. So that is that is my hypothesis from literature and from my observation. However, I'm fully testing the hypothesis in the work I'm starting next month. So it's not really a microorganism, because the work that I want to do now, I will use corn from Nigeria. And I will use corn in United States, because I want to prove that it's not just the microorganism, because the microorganism from the one in Nigeria will be different from the one in United States. But if both of them are still having the same effect, then it's the corn.
Yeah. It also sounds really interesting and beneficial in the sense that the antibiotics that we take, the medicine, they can have a destructive effect on other microorganisms in the gut and can damage health a little bit too, and need to be kind of rebuilt after you've taken them.
Yeah.
But it sounds like this is a more integrated, systemic kind of thing where it's not killing. It's more like it's making an inhospitable environment for certain kinds of microorganisms.
The good one, yeah.
But how does it know what are the good ones and what are the bad ones?
I know, because the preliminary study that we did, this corn was killing the bacteria that was causing diarrhea. But the good bacteria like the lactobacillus and of course is not killing them.
Wow.
So it's even selective, like it's the ones that is really pathogenic that we don't want is destroying them. The one that we want in our previous study is making them to be more. Like the lactobacillus that's in those animals, they started with very little. At the end of the experiment, they've like triple. Like they've totally increased their abundance from. So it's created an environment that is like the pathogenic one, the bad one are going down and the good one are increasing.
Wow. Well, that is extraordinary.
I know. If I'm not a scientist and if I didn't do all these things over several years, I think I'll be skeptical. But I've seen the proof over and over again, and that is what is giving me the confidence to be working more and more on this. Yeah.
And like you said, doing clinical trials will bear it out if it's true or not. Yeah. That's really exciting. You must have been pretty thrilled when you came upon this or when you got the results.
Like initially my student came and she was worried. She said, I didn't see any parasites. Like, to her it's like a wrong result. I didn't see any parasite in this then, but our experiment was set up with a lot of control. Like, okay, this one was normal. This one. So then why are you worried? It shows that they are not going. So I asked her to repeat something. She did, and it was still the same thing. Yeah. So they are not surviving there. The corn is not making the malaria parasite to survive in those animals. And I said, okay.
Yeah, I can imagine being like, okay, I must have done something wrong.
I know.
I need to redo it. Sorry.
Not even a single one.
Yeah, wow. So I mean, I can think about some of the effects that the contributions that this kind of research would have for the world. Could you talk about those a little bit, about what you see as possible benefits of this knowledge?
Yeah, so my future direction, if this also works in human, which I think it will, if the clinical trial and everything, if it goes well, then I think I want to start looking at this thing as something that people should just take for preventive medicine.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, is do people take it preventatively?
Because if you have something that goes into your body and it releases a lot of compounds and everything, then it means that it could be a preventive measure for cardiovascular diseases. So if this reducing the lipid in the blood, reducing glucose, then we don't have to wait until we get sick with this thing, because then it becomes more complicated once we are sick. But then it will just be something that people incorporate the way they do it in my culture. Like, it's just a normal thing. They just remove that. You don't have to be sick. They remove that water and then people drink it.
Like the whole family drinks it. Yeah.
People, and then sometimes they can put it on top of another cereal. You know, that water, they remove it and it's just like your breakfast cereal. Then they put that water on it and then they take it together. So I'm thinking not only for this food, but for many other fermented food also. If we take this could be a kind of preventive food, therapeutic food that could help us maybe to maintain the lipid in the blood, to maintain our glucose level, to maybe reduce this particular biomarker, to reduce inflammation, because most diseases are caused by low-grade chronic inflammation. So which is another time I'm actually going to test. So if we take this particular thing, it's reducing all the inflammatory biomarkers.
Yeah.
And the less the inflammation biomarker that we have, the better for us.
Yeah.
And I'm also looking for food that are not expensive.
Yeah.
Because fruits and vegetables, they are great. But of course, I also go to grocery store and I know how expensive they are. Sometimes for you to, because the very good fruits, like the berries, they are so great with antioxidants and everything. But maybe you want to buy blueberry, is $5 for just this small pack and everything. Those food work, but what about the expenses? Can everybody afford to be eating them a lot every day? But what if we also look for other meals, which is one of my big motivating factors with cereal, that are not expensive, and they also prove to be very effective for preventive medicine? Then it means that you can buy a big bag of feed corn. It's somewhere in your house, and then you are just milling it, and then you are taking the water on top, and it's not expensive at all. Yeah. So
how is the corn used as a food, like the corn that they're soaking? What then is done with it?
Yes. So the water on top is what I'll be working on. Mm-hmm. Now the solid mass, in my culture, they actually also use it to prepare a kind of cereal.
So it's like a breakfast cereal. It's sort of
Yes,
like a mush or like grits or something.
So they remove that mass and then they mix it with boiling water. So then you now have this semi-solid mass, and then they take it especially for breakfast. So some people will remove the water on top to drink, and some people will remove that water and put it on top of that cooked solid mass.
I see.
So it's like you are putting milk on a cereal. So that is the way they do it. And then they take it together. So, and they can also use that mass for a lot of things. So they can use it for breakfast cereal. They can use it to make a kind of paste that they will eat with soup. So there are so many things in my culture that they use this for, yeah.
Do they do something like what they might do in South American countries, making sort of a tortilla kind of thing that gets cooked or anything like that, like a flat?
I think they can fry it too. Some people fry it too. But that frying is not very common because, it's already fermented.
Oh.
So it has this kind of a little bit sharp taste, but not very sharp, but, the fermented taste, just like a yogurt.
Acidic. Yeah, that kind of
So
tang.
it has that. But so what they usually use it for more is to make breakfast And then maybe for dinner, they can also use it to make a very thick paste that they are going to eat with soup.
Okay.
So the way that works is, I think the nearest thing in American culture is just like, is it dumpling?
Dumpling?
Yes.
Okay.
So, you have a solid mass and then you have something like water, but not exactly, but something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So they make it for breakfast and then some people use it for that also.
And is the water that they're taking off of the corn, does it get a little bit cloudy? Like you described it as pouring milk over it. Does it get a little bit milky looking?
Yes. It's not
clear.
It's not transparently clear. So it gets, because of course the little bit of what is underneath. So if it's a yellow corn, it could be a little bit yellowish. If it's the white corn, it could be a little bit whitish.
Okay. Oh, it's really interesting. I just recently traveled to Japan, and I was in a restaurant, and we were served soba noodles, which is made from buckwheat. And at the end of the meal, they gave us this teapot that had the water in it that the soba had cooked in.
Okay.
And they tried to explain, but there was a language barrier, so I wasn't quite sure. But it was clear that this was supposed to have some health benefit.
Okay.
They said that they usually, after the meal, they pour it into their bowl and drink it.
Exactly.
And I was wondering if it's similar.
Something like that. Because actually, as I continue with my research, I'm not going to be limited only to maybe African diet. Like, I'm interested in diet from different parts of the world. Even United States diet, I'm interested in what is being used traditionally. Maybe 1950s, 1960s United States, before everything become noodles and meat and everything. Like the grandmothers. I was talking to someone, an American. I said, tell me your traditional food. Like, what will your grandmother prepare for you? Like, I'm more interested in what your grandmother, what do they have for breakfast, lunch, dinner? Because this Western influence is not only here, it's everywhere. Even in my country, these young children coming up now, most of their food are westernized. So this kind of food I'm talking about, the young, kids, although they are Nigerian, they will actually ask me now, what are you talking about?
Right.
We don't know what this is.
Yeah. I think it's interesting whenever it's something like that where it's like, what I was just describing with those noodles, like the fact that they're making a point of saving this water.
Exactly.
There must be a reason.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't taste particularly good or anything.
But for the health benefit.
There must be a reason that they keep doing it.
and they know it works for them. So, but sometimes we are so quick to disregard. Like me before, I could have said, "Oh no, that thing is just placebo is fake. It's because you guys believe it's going to work. That is why it's working." But until I started investigating that, so some of these claims are very real. Yeah. They are true. So if they say it's working, then sometimes I just want to test it myself. But as a scientist now, to be able to be sure it really works.
There's probably a lot of cultural traditions that if you go back and look at what have people been doing, and then actually test it to find out, is this just mythology? Is this just tradition? Is it placebo effect? But if
it works. So another thing, because I'm always having all these ideas in my head, they're always running around wide in my head. There was a time I look at my dad. My father is like 76, in his mid-70s. And where I come from, again, maybe not for the younger generation, but maybe the older generation, people don't visit dentists. So going to the dentist is like a modern thing. So people like my father's generation, they don't go to the dentist. Of course, they brush their teeth, but that is all the care they give to the teeth. And my father is 76 and he has never lost a single tooth in his life. And he has never visited a dentist to do any cleaning apart from brushing. And he just got to me like, no, wait, what is happening here? I visit the dentist every 6 months. This man's teeth is more healthy than mine. And at 76, my father eats anything sweet. He has this very sweet tooth.
Okay, so it's not that he avoids sugar.
No, he doesn't. And he's still eating all this sugar at 76 and he has never lost a tooth. And I don't think I've ever seen him complaining that he's having pain in his teeth.
Amazing.
And now this is, I'm going towards that direction again as I'm working with my food, that what is responsible for my father or many people like him that don't visit the dentist and at least they've never lost a tooth going into their 80s.
Yeah.
I have a theory that it could also be some of this food they take that is acting as a protection for them.
Yep.
Against all the bacteria that could make them to lose that teeth. And so I want to also investigate the food in relation to the oral microbiome.
Yeah.
Which is something else that's I want to do.
That sounds like that sounds like really useful research. I think we need to know. Yeah, because I've just always understood there's genetics, there's, the chemistry in your mouth, and all these different things. It's not just about what you eat or how much you brush. But yeah, so that's really interesting. And do you think that's pretty common for your father's generation? Like, are there others in the community?
So. I think it's very common for their generation that. So for my father, I've not complained of toothache since I've known him. But in their generation, I know that some people, even when they have that they're having pain in their gum, but what I know they do is they gargle with salty water. They just take a glass of warm water. They had maybe like one spoon of salt to it, and then they gargle, spit it out, and they're good to go. That is what I know they do. That I know very well.
That's great.
By the following day, they tell you that they don't have pain again. After using that, they don't swallow it, they just spit it out and they are good to go. So I'm sure I just want to also understand like what is happening there. If we are using the very good medicine, we are using the dentist, we are going to the dentist every 6 months. So if there's something useful that we could learn from them and we incorporate it with our dentist visit, then maybe we are going to have a very healthy teeth.
I'm speaking with Funmi Ayeni. She's a professor in environmental and occupational health at the School of Public Health at Indiana University. After a short break, we'll hear more from Funmi about her current research into traditional food used as medicine and find out where she hopes to take it next. Stay with us. Support for Earth Eats comes from Columbus, Indiana, overflowing with everywhere art and unexpected architecture. Tickets for guided architecture tours and trip planning at columbus.in.us. Kate Young here. This is Earth Eats, and I'm talking with Funmi Ayeni from the Department of Environmental and Occupational Health in the IU School of Public Health. Her work is focused on antibiotic resistance and the microbiome in the human body. She's interested in traditional household foods that are used as medicine and wants to learn how they stand up to the rigors of scientific research. Much of Funmi's research in the field involves collecting samples from the target populations, so that would be fecal samples for studying the gut microbiome or saliva if she's studying the oral microbiome. She also gathers information through questionnaires filled out by the study participants.
Most of this work were actually done in Nigeria. Then I came here, and then there was pandemic for like 2 years. I was in Boston.
And did that limit the research you were able to do?
Yeah, totally limits the research that we were able to do. So there was a kind of standstill. Then I came to Bloomington last year, and then we could start work. So what I'm currently doing now with my students, we are also going to some animal studies, still on this food, that's corn water.
Are you calling it corn water? Is that?
So I call it natural fermented milled corn, NFMC.
Okay.
So because naturally fermented meal, because those corn are actually milled.
Right.
So they are not whole grain, they are
Right.
milled. So that's what I'm calling the products now.
Wow. I wonder if the corn needs to be freshly milled or if you buy cornmeal at the store, is that going to be similar?
I tend to follow the way it is done in that particular kosher. So what I've always done is to get the whole grain, the feed corn. So I get the feed corn, we soak them for 48 hours, and then we mill them with a blender until they're very smooth. So we mill them like to make a very fine paste, and then we add water so that, when it makes the paste, so we add water so that there could be liquid on top and there could be solid at the bottom. And then we just set it. So after milling, we put it down and then we...
Okay, but before you milling it, you're soaking it in water, so it's already softened. So then you don't need that certain kind of grain mill. You could do it in a blender, like you said.
Yes, we could
because it's been softened.
Yes, we could.
Interesting. Okay, so you're soaking it, milling it, and then soaking it again.
So we soak, we mill, and then we leave it at room temperature to settle down for like 24 hours.
Oh, and then that water is what's pulled from it. Okay.
Yes, on top, yeah.
So right now you're doing another animal test.
Yeah, we are going to, for another animal because I want to see if the effects that I saw with Nigeria corn, if I will also see it with a United States corn. Bearing in mind that everything is different. No, it's still the same corn, just like human being. All of us are human beings, but people from Nigeria looks different from people from United States, right? Yeah. So that is the same way with the corn. Like, yes, it's also corn, but the environment where it was kosher, where it was grown, everything is different from Nigeria environment. And I just want to see, like, all those effects that I saw with Nigeria corn, am I also going to see it with the feed corn from United States?
Yeah. And you're using feed corn.
Yes. So it's not sweet corn. So the Nigeria one is just like the feed corn. It's a bigger grain. It's not the sweet corn. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we grow a lot of that, I think, here in the United States and
know.
here in Indiana.
In Indiana.
So
I think
spot.
especially Indiana. Yeah. I've actually, I went to the community markets in Indiana to look around, but I didn't see any, like that farmer's market. Then later I got to know that it's not the season. They're just planting it now. That before the feed corn will come out, maybe it's going to be later in the year. I said, okay. Yeah.
After the animal studies, Funmi hopes to move into human trials. She wants to look at some common health issues, such as high cholesterol and inflammation, and see what kind of effect this corn water could have in treating those types of issues.
And the good thing about this thing is, this is just, like I say, it's food. It's what people eat. So it's not like, maybe it's going to be toxic or it's going to kill people, It's just food.
Yeah. And it, like you said, it's so accessible. Like, I feel like, I could go home and do this.
Like anyone that has access to that has the corn can do it. And you don't have to look for other ingredients. You don't have to look for something to add, maybe have a cup of this or 2 cups of this. No, it's just corn and water with a blender. Yeah.
Wow. Do you think that you will, or maybe research that might stem from this, may not just be you doing it, but that people might start looking at some other grains, other cereals, and see what kind of effects they could have as well?
Exactly. So that is actually my dream, that with all the information we have on fruit and vegetable, which is great, and I'm sure we still keep on getting more information, but maybe to some other things that people have not really put in, like we've not put so much attention to in the science world. Some people have worked on it, but it's not the kind of work that you've seen in other kind of food. So people just take cereal as food, but I'm taking cereal as drug. Yeah. So like extending to any other cereal that could have all this effect. Maybe people start with a lot of preliminary data, like to all those lab work to see that do they have antioxidant property, do they have antibacterial property, do they have antiviral, which is what we did initially. And then if as the lab continue to see all these things, and then the person is convinced that, I'm getting a lot of good data, then we start going to the next step.
Yeah, that's very exciting. I just love hearing about this. because I've definitely looked into some of the fermented foods like sauerkraut
Yeah.
or yogurt or
A lot of study has been done on that, yeah?
yeah, or kombucha, and people are, but it feels like it's kind of a niche sort of market. Like some people are into doing that, and then other people, that's just not going to be part of their food. But
I
this
know.
feels like something that's just so
Yeah.
ordinary,
Yes.
and that
And
a
it's
lot of
serving
people could do it. It's accessible to a lot of people.
so ordinary, and it's having all these great effects.
So, can you say anything about what kind of led you to wanting to do this kind of science study? Like as a child, how did you grow up, and what kinds of things made you interested in pursuing science and this kind of work?
As a child, I actually don't know why, but like a very little child, if I'm sick, I'm not going to eat anything except fruit.
Huh.
My mother actually started calling me fruit.
So as a kid, when she was sick, Funmi would only eat fruit. To complicate matters, in Nigeria, the availability of fruit is seasonally dependent.
During the rainy season, when there's like the spring, we have abundance of like so many fruits everywhere. And then towards the end of the year, we go into a dry season. So during the dry season, you hardly see any fruit. All the fruits would have gone. So we don't do all this maybe greenhouse farming that you can have fruit all year.
Right.
And trust me, I will actually get sick during the dry season when there is no fruit. And my mother knows that I'm not going to eat anything unless I get fruit. She will now start looking all over the town.
Right.
Telling everyone that, please, do you just have a little fruit? Maybe you have maybe a little plant by the stream, by the water that is bringing you, because my daughter will not eat unless she sees fruit. And I'm the only one doing that in my family. Other people are not like that, but I'm the only one. And then as I grew older, if I want to eat, I'm comfortable eating fruit. Like I could eat fruit the whole day and I'm fine without even eating anything except fruit. So I eat more fruit and I'm okay. So as I now got into my graduate study and I began to work on therapeutic food, knowing all the benefit that all these things could do, I also apply it to my personal life, even as an adult. Like, if I have malaria, which everybody where I come from, like most people anyway, many people have malaria because it's endemic. If I'm having malaria, I'm not going to take drug. My first treatment for malaria is fruit and vegetable. Huh. I wasn't using this corn water then.
Because you didn't know about it.
But I just take fruit, vegetable, and then sleep. And then within 2 days, I'm fine, ready to get up.
So it sounds like you've always kind of been drawn to food as medicine.
I think so. So when I now look at that, my lifestyle, and then with the knowledge I started getting in science, I said, okay, at least this thing is working for me. So why don't we make it on a bigger scale?
Yeah.
Not only for me, let's make it for everybody. And then I have all the information I need about fruit and vegetable. Then why don't I just go into another niche where we don't have so much information? Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like as a child you kind of intuitively,
I know.
like it was just a desire for you, but there was some part of you that knew that's what you needed.
I think so.
I asked Funmi why she thought she hadn't been aware of the traditional corn water earlier in her life.
Okay, the reason why I didn't pay attention to it is naturally I don't like anything semi-solid. Like yogurt, something like that, yogurt consistency. And that is how this food is. So maybe that is why initially I didn't pay attention to it, because it's just like the food I just don't like naturally. When I now started going to that food and this thing, I just remember that, I see people around me always taking this thing for malaria. It just came to me. I just remember all those, like I put all those things together, and I just told my student that, why don't we investigate it? So it doesn't matter. Even if you have negative results, it's fine.
That's
so let's
great.
go to the lab and do this thing.
So it was really just an observation and then a hunch.
Yeah.
And let's try it. Let's find out. That's really great. That's the makings of a great scientist.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so grateful for Western medicine. I've had a very serious issue that when the doctor did the surgery and all my symptoms disappear, I said, doctors are miracle workers. Because how can I be having this very severe symptom and then somebody just come in somewhere, cut something, and I'm totally fine. I say, these people are great. So I love Western medicine.
Right.
However, I also look back that some of our ancestors are actually getting some things right. Of course, not everything. There are not many things they didn't get it right, but there are some things they got right with food. So instead of totally discarding those things, so I look back, I look into different culture. When I talk to people, I want to know what the grandmother cooks. I want to know what they eat when they were young. I think there's a lot of things to do to prevent diseases, especially many of these chronic conditions that we live with, if we can look back at what has been working before, and then we also combine it with going to our doctor with the Western medicine. I think that is the holistic medicine. That is my dream that I'm looking for.
Well, thank you so much for talking with me, Funmi. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That was Funmi Ayeni, professor in the Department of Environmental and Occupational Health in the IU School of Public Health. Find links to her work at eartheats.org. The Earth Eats team includes Eobon Binder, Alexis Carvajal, Alex Chambers, Mark Chilla, Toby Foster, Daniela Richardson, Samantha Schemenauer, Peyton Whaley, and Harvest Public Media. Earth Eats is produced and edited by me, Kate Young. Our theme music is composed by Aaron Toby and performed by Aaron and Matt Toby. Additional music on the show comes to us from Universal Production Music. Our executive producer is Eric Bolstridge.
Hoosier Spirits is a new documentary from WTIU and Indiana Public Media that explores Indiana's deep distilling roots and visits distilleries across the state to get a glimpse at the future of Hoosier Spirits. Learn more, check out a map of Indiana distilleries, and get the recipe for our exclusive cocktail at WTIU.org/Hoosier Spirits.